Hey guys, tonight we're diving fork first into a time when dinner could literally kill you. A world of fermented fish sauce, flamingo tongues, and wine mixed with lead. Yes, we're talking about ancient Roman food, because nothing says sweet dreams like garum-soaked dormice and questionable meat pies. So before we tuck in, please take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up late, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always 3 a.m. somewhere, and someone is always eating cheese in bed. Now, dim the lights, set your phone to Do Not Disturb, switch on that trusty fan for a whisper of white noise, and settle in. Because I have questions. Deep, uncomfortable questions. Like, did Roman chefs use flamingo because chickens weren't dramatic enough? How did people survive eating moldy bread soaked in vinegar? And was that considered a delicacy or a punishment? What did you do if your dinner moved, and it wasn't supposed to? Was Caesar salad actually Caesar's favorite, or did he die before salad was invented? Could you survive a Roman banquet, or would your body shut down halfway through the fourth course of jellyfish and pickled sow udder? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in Rome, 89 CE. You smell like olive oil, your toga is wrinkled, and someone just handed you a bowl of fish guts. Dinner is served. It's morning in Rome, and you're starving. Don't get excited. Breakfast here is less meal and more emergency ration. You're handed a crust of dry bread, dipped in wine that tastes like it lost a bet, and maybe, just maybe, a smear of olive paste that's older than the empire. Hope you weren't expecting eggs. Because eggs? Those are for the wealthy, or for festivals, or for being hurled at unlucky gladiators during rowdy arena games. Definitely not for you. You're a Roman citizen of no particular rank. Middle class, maybe, poor adjacent. Which means your breakfast is less farm fresh and more salvaged. This isn't a morning feast, it's a digestive negotiation. Your bread is called panis, but it might as well be called brickus. It's made from coarse flour mixed with yesterday's regrets and a handful of gravel. The Romans loved grinding their wheat with millstones that shed bits of stone into the dough, which means every bite doubles as dental roulette. Your molars win some, they lose more. There's no butter, no jam, not even a sad slice of cheese with a tragic backstory. Just the bare minimum to keep you upright long enough to complain about your job later. Maybe a fig if you're lucky. Maybe half a fig if someone already took the good half. Now let's talk about the olive paste. This dark, sludgy spread has the consistency of regret and the personality of an old boot. It's salty, oily, and clings to the roof of your mouth like an angry ex. Romans loved olives, loved them so much they mashed them, fermented them, dried them, and then dared each other to eat them for breakfast. Olive paste is what happens when your pantry says no, but your hunger says, please. It's been aging in a clay jar since Vesuvius was just a charming mountain. The taste is aggressive, sharp, like a slap from Poseidon. You dip your stone-like bread in it and chew slowly, because rushing this would be an act of war on your intestines. And what are you washing it down with? Ah, yes, Posca. A glorious Roman breakfast beverage made by mixing sour wine vinegar with water. It's what happens when your wine goes bad and instead of throwing it out you shrug and say, it's still technically liquid. The soldiers drink it. Labourers drink it. And now, unfortunately, so do you. It burns a little going down. Not because it's strong, but because your throat is asking why. This is not a refreshing mimosa. This is what a hangover drinks to punish itself. And there's no coffee, no caffeine, nothing to jolt your brain awake except the mild acid reflux and the slow realization that this is your life now. Your eyes are still crusty from sleep, your tunic is wrinkled, and someone nearby is loudly slurping olives like it's soup. Morning in Rome is not about serenity, it's about survival. You glance at your neighbours. One's gnawing on his bread like it insulted his family. Another's already halfway through a bowl of leftover lentils. From last night, cold, with a spoon made of wood and apathy. Children whine, dogs bark. Somewhere, a rooster is having an identity crisis. It's chaos, but it's routine. This is a city of 1 million people packed together with no refrigerators, no toasters, and no sense of portion control. You eat what you have, and what you have is gritty. Even the elite. Those toga-draped citizens with statues of themselves in the atrium don't do much better. Their breakfasts might include honey cakes or dates, but only if they're not hungover from last night's 9-course vomitorium party. More likely, they'll grab a mouthful of cold leftovers before heading out to shout about politics in the forum. And what if you're too poor for bread? Then it's a handful of chickpeas from a cart. Or maybe some boiled grain porridge, the consistency of wallpaper paste. No spoons? No problem. Just scoop it with your fingers and hope no one notices you haven't washed since Saturnalia. There's a reason the Romans didn't invent brunch. No one wants to linger over a plate of pickled anchovies and sour wine when your city smells like burning dung and ambition. Still, you chew. Because you're Roman. Because this is normal. Because at least the bread isn't moving. And when you're done, you wipe your hands on your tunic, burp quietly into your sleeve, and brace for the next part of your day. The work, the smells, the shouting, the heat. But for a brief moment, your stomach is not empty. And in ancient Rome, that's enough. Breakfast isn't a pleasure, it's a placeholder, a soft launch for a hard life. And if you're lucky, lunch won't be worse. But it probably will be. Your neighbor is boiling fish guts. Not in secret, not as a prank. This is garum fermented fish sauce, and it's the lifeblood of Roman flavor. It smells like betrayal and feet. Everyone's using it, even on fruit, even on dessert. Your nose may never recover. You wake up to the scent wafting in through your open window, except wafting implies gentleness. This is more of a siege. It punches you in the face, crawls into your sinuses, and settles in like it's paying rent. You try to ignore it. But garum does not want to be ignored. Garum wants attention. Garum demands to be noticed. And the thing is, it's everywhere. On tables, in markets, in the folds of your toga somehow. Every Roman household has a jar of it tucked away like a sacred relic. It's the go-to seasoning for everything from boiled cabbage to questionable cuts of meat. Think of it as the ketchup, soy sauce, barbecue glaze, and salad dressing of the ancient world if all those things were left in the sun for 6 months, with a few mackerels and a dream. Garum isn't just a condiment. It's an industry. Massive factories line the coast, where barrels of tiny fish, usually anchovies or sardines, are mixed with salt and left to ferment for weeks, under the blistering Sunday. The result? A viscous brownish liquid that somehow became the height of culinary sophistication. And no, you don't make it at home, unless you hate your family and want them to leave. Because the smell of garum in production isn't just bad, it's historic. Ancient writers literally complained about living near garum factories. One poet called them nose crimes. Another just moved. But once the fish rot reaches perfection, meaning it has stopped bubbling and hasn't, exploded, it's strained, bottled, and sent across the empire. Rich households buy the premium stuff, pale, golden, aged like wine. The cheaper versions, called alec, are thick, chunky, and usually sold in buckets. You get what you pay for, which in this case means choosing between unbearable and weaponized. You're handed a plate of lentils. You think, hey, this looks edible. But then plop a ladle of garum on top. Suddenly your lentils taste like low tide. You're chewing, sure, but also questioning every decision that brought you to this moment. It goes on everything. Bread, garum, stew, garum, pears, garum, a simple salad of cucumbers and herbs. Let's just ruin that with garum too. There's even a dessert recipe involving figs, honey, and a few drops of fish sauce. Because why not? Sweet, salty, fishy, the ancient Roman palate is out here playing sensory roulette, and they loved it. Apicius, the celebrity chef of ancient Rome, basically the Gordon Ramsay of Toga country, put garum in nearly every recipe. It's in his sauces, his soups, his meat dishes, and yes, even his cakes. Garum was considered classy, refined. If you weren't cooking with it, Were you even really Roman? At banquets, people passed around bowls of the stuff like it was fine olive oil. Guests would dip their bread, spoon it over their oysters, or just drink it straight if they were trying to impress someone they wanted to never see again. And heaven help you if you spill it, because garum stains more than fabric. It stains memories. The scent lingers for days, weeks. Your neighbor spilled some once on his sandals, and now the pigeons won't stop following him. You try to resist. You tell yourself, I'll just eat plain bread, no garum. But after a while, your tongue adjusts. Your brain gives up. You start to crave the salt, the tang, the unmistakable horror of fish-based umami. You find yourself saying things like, it's not so bad if you don't. Breathe while eating. You're halfway to addiction. And of course there's social pressure. You visit a friend's home for dinner. They serve boiled turnips with a generous drizzle of garum. You try to smile. You lie through your teeth. Delicious, you say, as your throat burns and your ancestors weep. The worst part? It spoils. Yes, fish sauce can go bad, which raises the question, what does bad even mean when the original product is already fermented fish sludge? One whiff and you'll know. It smells like someone tried to pickle a corpse in regret. Still, the Romans loved it so much they buried amphorae of it in shipwrecks. They carved recipes into stone. They wrote love poems about fish sauce. Okay, maybe not poems, but you can feel the passion. Garum wasn't just flavor. It was identity. And you? You're stuck with it. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe even a cheeky midnight snack. Because in ancient Rome, the question wasn't, do you want garum? It was, how much can your nose take before you pass out at the table? Midday means prandium, which is Latin for lukewarm disappointment. Cold leftovers, hard cheese, and maybe a fig crawling with something that isn't seasoning. You chew quietly and try not to gag while someone casually eats a boiled lark egg beside you. Because lunch in ancient Rome isn't an occasion, it's an afterthought. It's the thing you do when your body starts yelling and you realize breakfast was basically a salt lick dipped in vinegar. There's no grand table setting, no steaming bowls of comfort, and definitely no waiter asking if you'd like to substitute fries for a side salad. This is Rome, not a gastropub. You're sitting on a stone bench outside the tabernae, the Roman version of a food court, except most things here are served cold, sour, or suspicious. You unwrap your lunch, if you were lucky enough to pack one. It's wrapped in linen that used to be part of a curtain. Inside, a small wedge of goat cheese, a hunk of bread that could double as a blunt weapon, and a fig that's moving slightly. It's unclear whether it's ripening or staging an escape. You pop the cheese into your mouth and immediately regret it. It's pungent, sharp, and gritty in that how much goat is too much goat kind of way. The bread, predictably, is dry and rock hard. You soak it in a cup of watered-down wine just to make it chewable. The wine tastes like grapes had a nervous breakdown. And the worst part? This is a good day. If you're a laborer, a soldier, or just someone unfortunate enough to be alive and hungry, your lunch depends on what was left over from dinner. And dinner, as you may recall, was not exactly Michelin-starred. Leftover lentils that have dried into a paste. A few olives, now more pit than fruit. A boiled egg from an animal you're not entirely sure is still legal to eat. Sometimes, street vendors offer options: salted fish, slices of roasted root, vegetables, maybe even chickpeas, fried in oil, if the fryer hasn't caught fire again. But buyer beware, street food is cheap for a reason. It's been sitting in the sun since dawn. And that sizzling sound is mostly just flies. You try to eat fast, because lunch is a functional pause, not a leisurely break. There's no siesta. There's barely even a shadow to sit in. You chew with your back against a crumbling wall, while someone nearby loudly debates grain tariffs. A dog is licking a cabbage. A man is selling boiled snails from a cart that squeaks every time he moves it, which is constantly. Roman lunch doesn't include dessert, unless you count a slightly fermented pear. Or honey cakes, if you're rich and don't mind sharing them with bees. But mostly it's simple. Bread, cheese, fruit, sometimes a handful of nuts, sometimes not even that. One unlucky soul is gnawing on a strip of dried fish jerky that smells like despair and old sandals. The wealthy, of course, eat differently. Prandium for the elite might include leftovers from the previous evening's banquet, roast pheasant, stewed mushrooms, maybe even a sliver of pork glazed with honey and vinegar. But even then it's served cold. Reheated food? Not a thing. They just let the flavor settle, which is a euphemism for congeal. Nothing says luxury like a jellied duck foot next to your wine cup. And let's talk utensils, or the lack thereof. You're eating everything with your fingers, wiping them on the nearest rag, or if you're classy, your own toga. Plates are made of pottery, and if it breaks, well, congratulations. Your lunch just got a crunchy upgrade. No forks, no napkins, just vibes. You spot a child eating porridge out of a wooden bowl. It looks like it was made last week and reheated in the Sunday someone else bites into a boiled onion like it's an apple. Another person is dunking stale bread in olive oil so thick it might actually be a candle. The noises around you are unhelpful. Chewing, slurping. A man laughing so hard he accidentally inhales a chickpea. Someone sneezes and 3 pigeons scatter. And through it all, you just keep chewing your bland, gritty lunch, wondering how something this small can take this long to swallow. Eventually you finish. You're not full, just less empty, which, in ancient Rome, is as close as you get to satisfaction. You wipe your hands, shake the crumbs from your tunic, and stand up, bones creaking like a wooden door. Your lunch didn't inspire you. It didn't nourish your soul. It simply stopped your stomach from eating itself. And that's considered a win. Because here, lunch isn't a pleasure, it's damage control. You've been invited to a wealthy Roman's dinner party. Congratulations. You'll be served delicacies so rare they sound made up: flamingo tongue, parrot stew, and peacock brains. It's culinary chaos. And you're expected to smile through it. The sun has barely set, and already the villa is glowing like a pretentious lantern. Marble floors, mosaics of gods doing questionable things, and enough incense in the air to make you hallucinate halfway through the appetizer. Slaves scurry past carrying trays of drinks, jugs of wine, and something that might be a decorative cake or an animal's skull. It's hard to tell in this lighting. You've shown up in your best toga, which still smells faintly of garum and desperation. You're ushered through the atrium into the triclinium, the Roman dining room. Except surprise, no chairs. You're expected to recline on a couch while eating, propped up on one elbow like an injured swan. Comfort is not the goal, presentation is. The first course arrives. It's an amuse-bouche of something. You think it's bread. It might be cheese. It could also be hardened sheep, fat-shaped into a flower. It's served on a miniature silver platter with a single edible rose petal balanced on top, because nothing says appetite like inedible decoration. You nod politely. You chew. It's crunchy, but not in a good way. Then comes the wine. It's sweet, very sweet. Romans liked their wine heavily diluted and flavored with honey, resin, or herbs you suspect were collected during a lightning storm. You take a sip and immediately feel your teeth ache. It tastes like someone melted cough syrup into potpourri. The host stands to welcome the guests. He delivers a speech praising Bacchus, the god of wine, while comparing his cook to Mercury for reasons that don't entirely make sense. Everyone claps. A man sneezes into his wine cup. The entertainment begins some kind of interpretive dance involving a boy, a flute, and a goose. You don't ask questions. You just keep smiling. Now comes the second course. A platter is unveiled with a flourish, and on it lies a roasted dormouse, stuffed with pork, dusted with poppy seeds, lying in a shallow pool of honey. You try not to look it in the eyes. You glance at the host. He's watching. Everyone is watching. You pick up your spoon and dig in. The texture is alarming. The taste is somehow both sweet and meaty, like someone confused dessert with a threat. You chew slowly, blinking back the tears of someone who's trying very hard not to taste the fur. Next up, the pièce de résistance. Flamingo tongue. Yes. Flamingo. Yes. Tongue. The bird itself is considered too basic. Anyone can roast a flamingo, but its tongue? That's rare. That's expensive. That's prestige on a plate. You're presented with a skewer of the stuff, grilled, then bathed in a sauce made of honey, vinegar, and you guessed it, garum. Always garum. It's small, chewy, slightly rubbery, and somehow tastes like fish. You pretend it's squid. That helps a little. You tell yourself this is fine. You are cultured. You are sophisticated. You are deeply, deeply unwell. More courses arrive. Parrot stew, brightly coloured, unsettlingly feathery, served with a side of boiled turnips, sculpted into the shapes of mythical beasts. Peacock brains delicately scrambled and presented in tiny decorative eggshells. You're told it improves memory. You're also told not to ask how they got it out of the bird without breaking the skull. Stuffed sows udder, creamy, gelatinous, and vaguely unsettling in every possible way. It's served chilled, which makes it worse. It jiggles when you breathe near it. You try to pace yourself, but it's hard. Roman banquets are marathons, not meals. 8, 9, sometimes 12 courses, and you're required to at least taste everything. Not because it's polite, but because your host paid an obscene amount of money for this culinary horror show, and your facial expressions are part of the entertainment. Somewhere between the goose liver pudding and the eel jelly moulded into the shape of a dolphin, your stomach waves the white flag. You smile through clenched teeth. You sip more wine. You try not to look at the man next to you, who just asked for seconds on the pickled swan feet. The final course arrives. A surprise dessert. It's a pastry shaped like a rabbit, filled with dates, nuts, and of course more fish sauce. Because what is dessert if not a place to confuse your guests? You applaud when everyone else does. You recline like a pro. You make vague, complimentary noises as you wipe honey from your face with a silk napkin that costs more than your entire apartment. And when it's over, you thank your host profusely, compliment the food like you weren't emotionally wounded by half of it, and leave with a stomach full of regret and a brain full of questions. Because in wealthy Roman society, food isn't nourishment, it's theatre, and you just survived the first act. Yes, dormice. Fat, sleepy rodents stuffed with pork and dipped in honey. It's not a dare, it's an appetizer. They come rolled in poppy seeds like some kind of rodent sushi. You're trying not to cry. You didn't plan for this. You were just hoping for a simple dinner. Maybe some bread, some fruit, anything that didn't involve an animal that looks like a hamster wearing a sleep mask. But here you are, seated at a Roman feast, staring down a platter of gilded nightmare nuggets that are still vaguely mouse-shaped. Dormice, or gliss if you want to sound like a snobby senator, were considered a delicacy in ancient Rome, not a survival food, not something scavenged in desperation. This was a choice, a flex, a culinary, look how rich I am, wrapped in tiny paws and regret. They're farmed specifically for this purpose, kept in little clay jars called gleraria, basically rodent Airbnbs with food holes. The goal is to fatten them up until they're too chubby to move, which in Roman culture means ready to party. Once plumped, they're killed, deboned, stuffed with seasoned pork, sewn shut like a meat purse, dipped in honey, rolled in poppy seeds, and served lukewarm on silver trays by a man in sandals who's completely desensitized to horror. You reach for your wine. You take a sip. You stare at the dormouse. It stares back. It has a little nose, a little mouth. You're trying to tell yourself it's basically just a meatball with personality. But your hand is trembling. A guest beside you has already popped one into his mouth whole, like a marshmallow. He's chewing contentedly. He nods at you. Try it, he says. The honey balances the pork. You blink slowly, questioning the decisions that led you here. Across the table, someone is slicing their dormouse in half like it's a delicate tart. The cross-section reveals layers. Soft meat, gooey fat, crispy skin, and something that might be a raisin. Or an eyeball. It's hard to tell under the honey glaze. You pick up your own dormouse with trembling fingers. It's warm, sticky, slightly squishy. The poppy seeds fall off in little black flecks, like edible dandruff. You think about pretending to faint, or choking, on your wine, or faking a sudden religious conversion that forbids mouse consumption. But no, your host is watching. This is Rome. You must be brave. You bite. It's confusing. The pork is seasoned well, savory, salty. Then there's the dormouse meat, gamey, soft, vaguely nutty. And finally the honey, sweet and cloying, sticking to your teeth like emotional baggage. The texture is ambitious, somewhere between chewy fig and regretful marshmallow. You chew, you swallow, you smile weakly. The table erupts in approval. Someone claps. You are now officially part of the Dormouse Club. It does not feel like an honor. As you try to scrape the stickiness from your teeth with your tongue, a servant appears to refill your wine cup and offers a second dormouse. You decline politely, with the haunted look of someone who's just eaten a cartoon sidekick. He nods and moves on. You notice now that this is just the first course in a parade of culinary weirdness. But dormice always come first. They're the Roman version of shrimp cocktail, if shrimp were small mammals that lived in trees and had dreams. Some elite hosts even decorate their dormouse trays with tiny grapes and flowers to make the plate more inviting. Nothing says decadence like garnishing your rodent with a sprig of lavender. It's the edible equivalent of putting perfume on a taxidermy squirrel and calling it brunch. And this wasn't a rare event. Romans served dormice at weddings, business dinners, religious festivals, and even casual Tuesday night gatherings. There was no escape. If the host had money and wanted to impress, out came the dormice. It was the ancient world's most elaborate overcompensation. You wonder what they'd say if they saw our snacks. Potato chips, pizza rolls, string cheese. Would they be horrified? Or would they nod in approval and ask if we'd ever considered deep frying a raccoon? You take another sip of wine. It still tastes like melted raisins and wood polish. But at least it doesn't have a tail. The server clears your plate. You wipe your hands on a napkin that's more decorative than absorbent and lean back, dazed. You've done it. You've eaten the mouse. You've passed the test. You're part of the aristocracy now, or at least tolerated by it. And as the next course arrives, something bubbling in a silver bowl that smells vaguely amphibious, you realize something important. In ancient Rome, you don't eat to enjoy, you eat to endure. And dinner has only just begun. Roman salads weren't crisp, fresh, or safe. They were soaked in vinegar, sprinkled with herbs that might be poison, and casually topped with seafood or fermented sheep bits. There is no lettuce. There is only fear. You sit down for what you hope is a light course. Maybe something refreshing, something green, something that doesn't make you question your own morality. But this is Rome, and what arrives in front of you isn't a salad. It's a cryptid in a bowl. Let's start with the base. Forget romaine, iceberg, arugula, those haven't been invented yet, or worse, have been banned by common sense. Your greens are bitter herbs, wild endive, dandelion leaves, and something someone foraged from a ditch. It's not clear if it's edible. It might be a weed. It might be an angry, stinging plant. Either way, it's in your salad now. These leaves are not crisp. They are not crunchy. They are wilting like a disappointed aunt. They have the texture of damp parchment and the flavor of passive aggression. You chew carefully, because one of these herbs is supposed to aid digestion, and another might be poisonous if you make eye contact with it too long. And then there's the dressing. Modern dressings are designed to enhance flavor: vinaigrettes, creamy ranch, citrus blends. Roman dressings are designed to test your will to live. The base is vinegar, always vinegar. Sharp, acidic, possibly weaponized. It's mixed with olive oil that may have been pressed during the reign of Caligula, and then infused with herbs, garlic, and why not fish sauce? Garum. Again. So, yes, your salad dressing is mostly fermented fish guts with a side of wine vinegar and crushed mustard seed. It doesn't just wake up your palate. It waterboards it. Your tongue recoils. Your teeth feel softer. Your stomach writes a formal letter of protest. But we're not done yet, because in Rome, salads aren't vegetarian. That's not how they roll. Your bitter greens are topped with anchovies, or pickled herring, or a spoonful of jellyfish that's been cured in brine and served with smugness. Sometimes you'll get hard-boiled eggs, sliced thin and draped over the top like ominous little lids. And if you're truly unlucky, today's salad features slivers of sheep brain, fermented and mashed with garlic into something they call a delicacy, but feels more like a hazing ritual. You try to rearrange the plate, hiding the more aggressive components under a sprig of mint. You attempt to bite. The vinegar hits first sharp, burning, apologetically acidic, then the fish, then the herbs. One of them tastes like licorice, one of them tastes like whetstone. The final note is something between old boot and regret. You chew slowly and nod. You smile. You lie. So fresh, you say. So complex. Meanwhile, across the table, someone is eating a salad composed entirely of pickled onions and honey-roasted leeks. Another person has a bowl of cucumber slices, soaked in vinegar and garum, topped with a sauce made of pureed dates and mustard. It's less of a salad and more of a dare. To the Romans, this wasn't strange. This was culture. This was cuisine. The blend of sweet, sour, salty, bitter, what they called sapors. To them, a salad that didn't confuse you wasn't doing its job. If you didn't break into a mild sweat while eating it, was it even food? You take another bite. Something crunches. You pray it was a crouton. Then you remember, croutons haven't been invented. It was probably a fish bone. You swallow anyway. And what about presentation? Oh, it's stunning. The bowl is carved from marble, chilled with wet cloths. The salad is arranged like a miniature battlefield, with egg slices as shields, herbs like banners, and anchovies forming a defensive line. You're not sure whether to eat it or reenact a war with it. You look around the room. Everyone is eating with enthusiasm, chewing with purpose. Not a single person looks concerned that their salad contains something that might have once been moving. You realize something important. You're the strange one. You, with your modern salad expectations. Your hope for lettuce. Your innocent belief in freshness. In Rome, salad isn't a side dish. It's an experience. It's a warning. It's what happens when you ask for something light, and the chef says, "Ah, you want suffering in a bowl." You take one final bite, wash it down with wine that's been cut with seawater, and lean back. Your stomach is braced, your tongue is numb, but you did it. You survived the Roman salad. Now let's see what horror arrives for the main course. Bread in Rome comes in two forms, rock or sponge. Either way, it's been sitting out since Hadrian was a toddler. You chew through it like you're digging a tunnel with your teeth. Bonus: it's full of sand. You're handed a hunk of panis quadratus, the Roman version of bread. It's round, flat, and pre-scored into wedges, helpful if you have a sword. Less helpful if you have teeth. You knock it against the table. It makes a sound. A sharp, distinct clack, like someone just dropped a brick onto marble. This is not bread. This is a blunt instrument. Roman bread is made from coarse wheat flour, water, and a dash of sheer stubbornness. If you're rich, your flour has been sifted. If you're not, it contains everything. Husks, stray pebbles, probably a fossil. Grinding wheat back then involved giant millstones that shed tiny fragments of stone into the flour. This wasn't a defect. It was fiber. You bite down. Your molars hit something sharp. You pause. Was that a rock? A seed? Part of your own tooth? No time to find out. You're halfway through the loaf and the texture hasn't improved. If anything, the internal layer is denser. Slightly moister, yes, but only in the way a forgotten sponge in the back of a sink is moist. If you're a soldier or a laborer, bread is your main source of calories. You eat it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, sometimes alone, sometimes with vinegar, sometimes with olives if you're lucky. If not, you just gnaw on it like an angry beaver, quietly resenting your life choices. But don't worry, there are variations. There's panis plebeius, the bread of the common people, brown, dense, speckled with things that crunch but probably shouldn't. Then there's panis militaris, the hardtack-style loaf given to soldiers. It's durable, portable, and has the shelf life of a limestone countertop. Roman legions used to carry it for weeks, break off chunks with a dagger, and soak it in wine until it stopped resisting. It's said that if you dropped one of these loaves from a tower, it could kill a man, possibly two. Wealthier Romans might enjoy panis candidus, a whiter bread made from refined flour, usually baked by someone else. Bakers were respected but also suspiciously powerful, capable of feeding thousands and also, if rumors are true, sneaking in ashes, sand, or worse if someone didn't pay on time. And yes, there were bakeries, lots of them. Public bakeries churned out hundreds of loaves each day, stamped with identifying marks so no one could pretend their bread hadn't been baked with gravel and heartbreak. Archaeologists have found loaves of Roman bread still preserved in volcanic ash, carbonized, blackened, and still somehow recognizable by their signature wedges and texture of regret. But the real issue? Storage. Romans didn't have plastic wrap. They didn't have fridges. Bread went stale within hours, and mold followed quickly. So you either ate it all immediately, rehydrated it with soup or wine, or carved it into a sculpture of Jupiter and called it home decor. You look around and notice other diners using their bread for things other than eating. One is sopping up sauce. Another is using it as a plate. A third has broken his in half to wedge under a wobbly table leg. Multifunctional, yes. Edible, debatable. And let's not forget pulse, a type of porridge made from ground grains, essentially pre-bread. It's boiled with water or milk until it reaches a consistency best described as sad. Romans sometimes added cheese or honey to make it palatable, but deep down everyone knew it was hot wallpaper paste. That's why bread became the go-to. Even when it was bad, it was better than that. Occasionally, bread was used in religious offerings. Special loaves were baked for gods, priests, or festivals. You'd see towering pyramids of bread stacked high, adorned with herbs and incense. But even then, you got the sense that the gods would have preferred a fruit basket. So you keep chewing. Slowly, carefully. Your jaw aches. Your gums are sending you coded warnings. You take another sip of wine not because it pairs well, but because it softens the crust just enough to make swallowing an option instead of a challenge. At some point, you begin to hallucinate a world with fluffy rolls, warm sourdough, soft butter. But here in Rome, bread is not comfort food. It is a rite of passage, a structural material, a dietary gamble. You stare at the remaining hunk on your plate. You could throw it at a wall and take out a chunk of plaster. You could save it for later and use it as a doorstop. But no, you tear off another bite. Because you're Roman, you're tough. You're hungry. And in this city, bread isn't baked for joy. It's forged for survival. Roman wine isn't wine. It's an experiment, diluted with seawater, flavored with herbs, and occasionally sweetened with lead. Yes, lead. The hangover isn't just bad. It's historic. You're handed a clay cup. It's lukewarm. The wine inside is the color of old cough syrup and smells like someone left a fruit salad in the sundae. You raise it to your lips and take a cautious sip. It tastes sharp, sour, and slightly metallic, like grape juice filtered through a bronze coin. Congratulations. You've just tasted Roman wine. Now, to be fair, wine in Rome was everywhere. It was the social glue of society, served at meals, meetings, festivals, and funerals. Even children drank it, though theirs was usually extra diluted to prevent them from launching into philosophical arguments about destiny and sewer maintenance. But don't picture rolling vineyards and aged oak barrels. Roman wine wasn't sipped delicately on a balcony while someone played the lyre. It was stored in giant clay jars called amphorae, sealed with resin, and buried halfway in the ground to keep it from fermenting into paint thinner too quickly. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it did not. And the wine itself? It came in a dazzling variety of disappointment. Some were thick and syrupy, others were thin and acidic. Some were so strong they had to be cut with water at a 4-to-1 ratio before drinking. A few were probably just vinegar in disguise. The Romans called those rustic. Everyone else called them punishment. But it wasn't just water they mixed with it. No, that would be too predictable. Roman vintners added seawater for saltiness, herbs for flavor, chalk to adjust the color, and if they were feeling ambitious, a little splash of lead. Yes, lead. You see, lead acetate was sweet, and Roman winemakers, faced with the naturally bitter, acidic taste of their products, discovered that boiling wine in lead pots created a syrupy concoction called supper, basically a sweetener made of slow death. It made the wine taste better, for a certain value of better, and also slowly poisoned generations of Romans from the inside out. Lead poisoning wasn't a side effect, it was a lifestyle. Headaches, fatigue, organ failure, it was all part of the vintage experience. Aristocrats especially loved sapa, pouring it liberally into their finest wines. They got sweeter grapes and shorter lifespans. Meanwhile, if you were a bit lower on the social ladder, you got Laura wine's deeply disappointing cousin. Made by soaking the leftover grape skins, seeds, and stems in water and pressing it all again. Laura was the drink of slaves, and the extremely broke. Imagine wine that's been washed twice, and then emotionally abandoned. Still, wine was wine, and Romans drank it constantly, at breakfast, with lunch, during state business, while composing epic poetry, or while watching someone wrestle a bear in the Colosseum. It wasn't seen as indulgent, it was hydration with flair, and every respectable Roman house had a wine cellar, or at least a wine corner. There were different vintages, different provinces, even different gods you could thank for a decent buzz. Falernian wine was the gold standard, strong, expensive, and aged into legend. If someone served you Falernian, they were either wealthy or showing off, possibly both. The poorer stuff came from Gaul or Hispania and often tasted like regret and unfinished arguments. Still, Romans tried to doctor it. They'd add honey, herbs, myrrh, or even ashes to balance the palate. One popular blend included boiled dates and crushed rose petals. Another tasted like cinnamon, cloves, and despair. As for storage, wine jugs were often reused, sometimes poorly cleaned, and occasionally still labeled with the previous owner's name. You could be drinking from a vessel once used to hold fish sauce, or worse, garum-infused wine, a delicacy for people who truly hated joy. And let's not forget the banquets. Wine flowed freely, but there were rules. Too much drinking, and you risked embarrassment. Too little, and people assumed you were plotting something. The goal was a delicate wobble between tipsy and tragic. Get it wrong, and you'd wake up under a table next to someone's sandal, contemplating your life choices. You swirl the wine in your cup. It sloshes like a science experiment. You take another sip. It doesn't taste better, but your mouth is numb now, so that helps. And despite everything, the seawater, the lead, the suspicious undertones of parsley and panic, you keep drinking. Because in ancient Rome, wine isn't just a beverage, it's a gamble, a social requirement, a slow-moving catastrophe in a cup. Cheers. At Roman banquets, hygiene is a team effort. One communal napkin, one serving spoon, and someone just sneezed into the fruit bowl. You try to politely decline and immediately offend the host. Because refusing food isn't just rude, it's practically treason. In ancient Rome, sharing a meal is an intimate social contract. You are now contractually obligated to pretend you didn't see that man lick his fingers and reach directly into the honeyed dates. It's fine, everything's fine. You're just going to chew very slowly and think of clean rivers. Let's talk about the napkin, or rather, mappa. There's one of them. One. It's large, linen, and passed around the table like a relic. You wipe your hands, fold it politely, and pass it to the next person, who unfolds it and reveals the damp, stained evidence of 3 previous users. Someone's already blown their nose into it. Someone else wiped a bit of dormouse gravy. A child dabbed a finger full of melted honey on the corner and then licked it off like that was totally normal. And it was. In Rome, germs are a mystery. Microscopes haven't been invented. Soap is optional. Clean hands are aspirational. Personal space is a myth. And communal dining means communal everything. Now comes the cochlearia, the one spoon. It's decorative, silver, and tragically overworked. Meant for serving, scooping, sharing, and sometimes stabbing olives out of a fellow guest's bowl. Everyone uses it. Everyone. You're watching a man stir a pot of lentils, then pass the same spoon across the table so someone else can fish out a poached egg. No rinsing, no washing, just vibes. You reach for a fig, only to realize it's been handled by at least 6 fingers not belonging to you. You take a deep breath. You pretend not to notice. You remind yourself you've survived worse. You drank the wine after all. Across from you, a man coughs directly onto the platter of cheese. He does not apologize. No one even flinches. It's just air, they assume. Probably healthy air, full of rustic character. Someone sneezes. Not just a polite sneeze, a volcanic sneeze. The kind that leaves bystanders wondering if they need to be baptized. It lands squarely in the fruit bowl. The same fruit bowl someone just invited you to try. Grapes glisten with a suspicious new sheen. A pomegranate seed slides gently toward your elbow. You nod politely and say you're full, your stomach already busy digesting trauma. The host notices. He leans in, smiling with wine-stained teeth. "Eat, my friend," he insists, pushing a platter of marinated mushrooms closer. The same mushrooms you watched a guest drop on the floor and quietly return to the tray. You smile back, with all the joy of a condemned prisoner. You take one. You eat it. It's slightly gritty, slightly cold, and deeply suspicious. But your host beams. Your sacrifice has earned you political capital. Or at least dessert. You pray it's not another round of shared melon slices glazed in someone else's breath. And this is normal. This is expected. Romans believe in the healing power of community, which is poetic, until you're elbow deep in someone else's stew and wondering if that tickle in your throat is the early stages of a historical disease. There is no hand sanitizer, no cutlery for everyone, just a few shared spoons, one knife for cutting everything from bread to mystery meat, and the occasional toothpick made of bone passed around like a treasured heirloom. You find yourself reaching for wine more often not for the flavor, but for the vague hope that the alcohol might kill whatever you just ingested off that communal fig. And what about the plates? Ceramic, sure, but rarely washed. Maybe wiped. Maybe rinsed in water that's been used for about 7 other tasks that day, including washing feet and watering dying potted plants. You don't ask questions. You just chew. The kids at the banquet are doing their part too. One sneezes directly into a bowl of honey cakes. Another drops a piece of sausage, picks it up with his entire hand, and offers it to you with a grin. You nod and pretend to cough into your sleeve while discreetly giving it to the dog under the table, who is already developing immunity to things modern medicine hasn't even named. Still, no one's alarmed. In Rome, the presence of food is a gift. The presence of shared food is sacred. Your immune system? That's your business. You finish your meal, pat your stomach gently, and try not to dwell on the fact that you may have just shaken hands with ancient bacteria. Or worse, made eye contact with someone while they licked the communal spoon. Because in ancient Rome, hygiene isn't a personal habit, it's a group activity. And if you make it to dessert, congratulations. You're stronger than you look. Snails are not peasant food, they're premium, specially fattened on milk and herbs. You're handed a toothpick and told to dig in. You try not to imagine what its name was before dinner. The shell is glossy, decorative, like someone polished it lovingly before boiling its previous occupant. It sits on your plate like it owns the place, small, coiled, and radiating confidence. You've seen escargot on menus before, sure, but this is Roman snail. No garlic butter, no crusty baguette. Just you, a wooden toothpick, and the faint sense that you're about to eat something that once had opinions. In elite Roman households, snails weren't just a novelty, they were status symbols. You didn't find them crawling around the garden. You bred them. Carefully, methodically. These weren't your average gutter mollusks. They were gourmet gastropods, pampered with a bespoke diet of milk, bran, and fragrant herbs. Some were even fattened in special snail pens, monitored like VIP spa guests, who were unaware their massage appointment would end with garlic sauce and applause. Your host explains this as he gestures to the platter, proud as a new father. These are from Liguria, he says, fed on thyme and honeyed milk. You nod as if that makes anything better. You pick up your toothpick, which feels alarmingly flimsy for the task ahead. The snail looks at you. Well, it did, once. Now it just sits there, waiting to become a story you'll never fully recover from. You insert the pick, twist gently, and extract the meat. It stretches. It glistens. It resists slightly, like it's having second thoughts. The taste? Earthy, rubbery, slightly briny. The herbs come through, vaguely, like they're trying to apologize. The texture is what you'd get if calamari married a pencil eraser. Not bad, exactly, but not something you'd request again without at least 3 glasses of wine in your system. Across the table, your fellow diners are popping snails like peanuts. One dips his in vinegar. Another swirls his through garum. A third adds a dab of mustard and swears it elevates the mollusk. You're still chewing your first one, wondering how many more it will take before you stop seeing their little antennae in your peripheral guilt. But the Romans weren't just eating these for taste. No, snails had health benefits, at least according to Pliny the Elder, who had a medical theory for pretty much everything, including snails being great for digestion, energy, and possibly heartbreak. Whether or not they worked is irrelevant. They made you look smart and rich. That was enough. And they were sustainable too. Easy to breed, easy to store. And unlike cows or goats, they didn't scream when you picked them up. They just accepted their fate. Quietly, slimmily, with dignity. You look down at the platter. Dozens of shells, each with a backstory. One of them might have been born last month in a luxurious snail nursery outside of Pompeii, hand-fed fig leaves, and whispered poetry until the day someone said, "Nice and plump, perfect for tonight." You take another. This one's a bit softer, almost buttery. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a red flag. You chew slowly and sip your wine, lead-sweetened, naturally. It pairs with snail surprisingly well, in that everything tastes better if your tongue is partially numb, kind of way. One guest is now demonstrating his technique. Twist, hook, scoop. He's a professional. You wonder if he's ever pulled a muscle doing this. Meanwhile, another is explaining which region produces the best snails, complete with hand gestures and a dramatic reenactment of a snail crossing a vineyard. You nod along, trying to look impressed and not utterly unhinged. By your 5th snail, something changes. Maybe it's acceptance. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome. But you stop questioning it. The slimy, earthy chew becomes familiar. You start wondering if you can ask for a dipping sauce without seeming barbaric. Still, it's hard to forget the visuals. The spiraled shell, the tiny inner curl of the meat, the faint suggestion of eyeballs. You try not to think about their little lives. Their peaceful days of climbing walls, hiding in cool corners, and then bam, gourmet death spiral. As the platter empties, your host beams with satisfaction. A fine vintage, he says, which is a deeply upsetting way to refer to livestock. You thank him, burp discreetly, and pretend you're full. Because in Rome, snails aren't weird. They're aspirational, they're refined. They're the ancient equivalent of eating gold-flaked sushi off a marble slab, pointless, extravagant, and guaranteed to make you question your tax bracket. You lean back, the toothpick still in hand, and try to look composed. But inside, you just ate a snail. And you're not entirely sure you hated it. Forks haven't been invented yet. You're scooping squid chunks with your bare fingers while trying to keep your toga clean. Dignity? That's a Greek word. You're hunched over a low table, elbow deep in something that might be seafood stew, and everyone around you is acting like this is completely normal. Because it is. In ancient Rome, eating is a hands-on experience. Literally, you get a knife, maybe a spoon. But most of the action is finger-based grabbing, scooping, pinching, licking, and occasionally wiping your palm on the nearest tapestry when no one's looking. The concept of cutlery hasn't quite caught on. Forks exist in theory, but they're more like two-pronged barbecue tools for stabbing meat during cooking, not for dignified dining. If you used one at the table, people would think you were either a blacksmith or possessed, or both. So here you are, gingerly pinching a cube of squid from a communal dish, trying to avoid dripping fermented fish sauce onto your borrowed toga. It's not going well. Your fingers are oily. The squid is slippery. You feel like you're trying to eat soup with chopsticks made of butter. Every few seconds, someone reaches across you to grab a fig, a date, or an entire boiled quail with their bare hands. There's no such thing as your plate. Everything is shared. Dishes are passed around like currency. You take what you can, when you can, and try to remember who just licked their fingers before touching the stuffed eel. You look down at your hands. They smell like vinegar, garlic, and something fishy. You've wiped them 3 times on a napkin that might have once been white but now resembles a tragic mosaic of grease stains. You attempt a polite clean-up with a bowl of scented water nearby, only to realize it's already murky with someone else's fingers. You stare into the bowl. It stares back. You decide to live with the stickiness. Across from you, a man is eating a plum while lecturing about stoicism. Juice dribbles down his arm. No one says anything. Another guest is enthusiastically ripping apart a small roasted bird with his bare hands, bones flying in every direction. You flinch as a wing lands on your plate. It's still warm. Somehow this is considered elegant. You spot a servant walking by with a towel. You flag him down. He hands it to you, unfazed by the state of your hands, and you wipe them clean for now. Seconds later, someone offers you a sweet pastry dripping with honey. You accept it. You're sticky again. It's a cycle with no end. And the worst part? You're supposed to look graceful. Roman elites prided themselves on their composure while eating. You're not supposed to shovel food in like a starving gladiator. You're supposed to pluck it delicately, nod appreciatively, and nibble like a noble woodland creature. Unfortunately, your current method more closely resembles a raccoon trying to eat spaghetti. There's a rhythm to it all: reach, scoop, chew, sip, dab, repeat. You try to follow along. Your host watches, smiling like a parent watching their child try to walk for the first time. You drop a piece of sausage. You panic. You pick it up with as much composure as you can muster and hope no one notices. Everyone notices. A woman beside you hands you a bowl of what looks like figs soaked in wine. You thank her with a nod and pick one up, only to realize it's boiling hot and full of seeds. You cough mid-bite. A seed shoots out. It hits the wall. The host laughs. You are now part of the entertainment. At this point, your toga has become a casualty. The front is splattered with olive oil, crumbs, and a questionable streak of mustard. You attempt to blot it with your sleeve, but your sleeve is also covered in squid ink. You now look like you lost a food fight with Poseidon. Still, no one cares. Because in Rome, eating with your hands isn't undignified, it's expected. It shows you're connected to your food. It shows you're confident. And it shows you're willing to get personal with a meatball, if that's what the evening demands. Sure, you may leave dinner sticky, stained, and mildly traumatized, but you also leave full, possibly wiser, definitely greasier. And as you glance around at your fellow diners, elbows deep in stuffed dormice and sweetened lentils, you realize one thing. Etiquette is relative. Dignity is optional. But finger food? That's eternal. So go ahead, grab another squid, wipe your hand on something decorative, and pretend you weren't just using your sleeve as a napkin. Because in ancient Rome, if your fingers aren't sticky, you're probably not doing it right. You thought dinner was done? You were wrong. The next course is eel jelly, followed by something on fire. There's poetry recitation in between. You pray for an earthquake. At this point, you've eaten enough to qualify for Roman citizenship by caloric intake alone. You've survived pickled dormice, a communal spoon that's seen things, and a salad that legally counts as an assault. You're bloated, sticky, and possibly hallucinating from the wine or the lead in it. But just as you're about to sigh in relief, the host claps his hands. Servants appear with more trays, more food, more drama, more chances to regret your choices. You steel yourself as the next dish is unveiled. Eel, in aspic. Yes, that's jellied eel. A shimmering, wobbly gelatin mold encasing a slightly curved eel, like a seafood lava lamp. It jiggles ominously as it's set down. You wonder if it's supposed to move that much. You wonder if it's trying to escape. A spoon is passed around, the same one, of course, and guests gleefully scoop chunks of transparent wobble onto their plates. You take the smallest piece humanly possible, and it slides onto your plate like a sea creature auditioning for a horror film. You poke it. It quivers. You poke it again. It glares at you. With a resigned sigh, you raise it to your mouth. Cold, slippery, slightly fishy. The flavor is medicinal? Possibly because it's been infused with herbs you're fairly certain are banned in 3 provinces. You chew once, you swallow, you nod politely, as if you weren't just betrayed by your own gag reflex. You glance at the door. No one's leaving. No one wants to leave. Because in Roman elite culture, banquets aren't just meals, they're marathons. They are theatrical events designed to show off the host's wealth, stamina, and impressive tolerance for questionable poultry. The meal unfolds in acts, like a badly directed play. You've completed the gustatio, the appetizers, and the prima mensa, the main course. But now you're in the secunda mensa, dessert. Except dessert is a loose term here. One of the upcoming dishes involves peacock tongues dusted with cinnamon. Another is a pie that may or may not contain live songbirds, depending on whether the chef is feeling chaotic. And between each course, entertainment. The lights dim well, the oil lamps flicker lower, and a man in robes takes center stage. He's a poet. He begins reciting his epic on the tragic love between a goat and a celestial nymph. His voice is nasal. His delivery is passionate. His poem is 47 stanzas long. You sit politely, eel jelly coagulating on your plate, and try not to fall asleep or scream. When the poetry ends, a lyre player takes over. The music is haunting, mournful, and very off-key. You glance around and realize half the guests have leaned back onto pillows, eyes half closed, not from sleep but from food-induced paralysis. You sip more wine. You stopped tasting it 3 goblets ago. Now it's just a coping mechanism. The next course is brought in with dramatic flair, something roasted, possibly a goose, possibly several geese stitched together. It's flambéed tableside, the flames rising with a hiss and catching your eyebrows' attention. Everyone claps. You pretend not to panic. The bird is carved with alarming speed. Meat, juices, steam, it's a sensory assault. It's handed to you on a fresh plate, one that smells faintly of lavender and failure. You take a bite. It's rich, gamey, slightly overcooked. You nod again, your jaw moving on autopilot. Your stomach has long since submitted to fate. And just when you think it's over, when the final bite is chewed, the final poem recited, and the final pigeon pie passed, your host rises with a grand smile. He thanks everyone for attending. You reach for your cloak, giddy with anticipation. Then he announces, "Now, the true entertainment begins." There's more? Oh yes. The night continues with interpretive dance, a satirical play about Jupiter's poor fashion sense, and a surprise musical performance involving tambourines, goats, and a man named Flavius, who probably shouldn't be shirtless in public. You are no longer eating, you are surviving. Your toga has crusted into a wearable timeline of the evening's chaos. Your hands are coated in a fine sheen of oil, fruit syrup, and humiliation. You begin to lose all sense of time. You're not sure if it's still night. You're not sure if it's still Rome. You may have transcended into another plane of existence, where food is infinite, sleep is illegal, and entertainment is mandatory. Finally, after what feels like an entire lunar cycle, The banquet ends. The host bids farewell. Guests stagger out, giggling, burping, and clutching their stomachs. You exit into the cool Roman air, blinking like you've just escaped captivity. Somewhere, a rooster crows. It's dawn. You've been eating since sundown. You did it. You survived the 8-hour banquet. Barely. And you'll never look at eel jelly the same way again. Most of this feast isn't about taste. It's about flexing. The host is showing off rare spices, extinct birds, and desserts shaped like mythical creatures. None of it is edible. All of it is exhausting. You stare at your plate, unsure whether to eat it or offer it as tribute to a minor deity. It's shaped like a griffin, dusted in gold leaf, and smells faintly of cinnamon and fear. The tail is made of spun sugar. The wings are made of dyed pastry. The beak appears to be an almond crust. You take a bite. It tastes like regret. Because this isn't food. This is performance art. Every dish tonight has been an announcement, not a meal. You haven't eaten a single thing that wasn't sculpted, dyed, lit on fire, or previously endangered. And at this point, you're starting to think the real purpose of Roman cuisine was to emotionally damage its audience. Your host beams as yet another round of food is carried in this time. A massive platter featuring a roasted swan stuffed with songbirds, stuffed with quail eggs, stuffed with herbs imported from a mountain only 3 people have climbed. The whole thing is surrounded by petals, gilded nuts, and what appears to be a live turtle for aesthetic balance. The turtle looks embarrassed. This is Sinar in the Roman elite circle. Not just to dine, but to dazzle. The guests aren't here to eat. They're here to witness. To nod appreciatively at the cost of saffron from Asia, to marvel at a dessert molded into a miniature aqueduct, to politely applaud a fig that's been dyed purple using crushed shellfish, because purple is for emperors. The whole event is culinary theatre. Food is the script. You, unfortunately, are an unpaid extra. Let's talk about spices. In Rome, spices were wealth, not flavour. Cloves, cinnamon, peppercorns, none of them local, all of them expensive, imported from far-flung corners of the empire and beyond. People didn't season their food to make it better. They seasoned it to say, "Look what I can afford." Your host just served black pepper on a peach. Not because it pairs well, but because black pepper is worth more than your monthly rent. Saffron's in the bread, cardamom's in the fish. You're pretty sure someone used nutmeg in the hand soap. You try to keep up. You nod when others nod. You mutter, "Oh, fascinating," when a servant explains that this particular goose was massaged with honey for 3 weeks before being roasted inside a wild boar stuffed with prunes. You sip your wine, which has been steeped in roses and possibly ambition. No, one talks about taste. They talk about origin. About the trade route that brought this cinnamon stick from India. About how long it took the merchant to risk his life sailing past pirates just so this table could be mildly disappointed in the way it clashes with the pine nuts. And the animals? Oh, the animals. Flamingo tongues, peacock livers, ostrich eggs the size of a toddler's head. If it's rare, expensive, or critically endangered, it's being served. Half the dishes here come from creatures you're fairly sure are mythical. You just ate something described as a phoenix fritter. It tasted like chicken. Slightly burnt chicken. You're not sure if that was intentional or symbolic. And then there's the sugar work. Oh, the sugar. Sugar was rare, wildly expensive, and usually imported from India. So naturally, your dessert is a centerpiece, a giant edible statue of Hercules wrestling a crocodile, made entirely of hardened syrup and crushed almonds. It's impressive. It's shiny. It's absolutely inedible. You break a tooth trying to bite the spear. You look around and realize no one is actually eating. They're admiring, poking gently, whispering excitedly. A few guests are documenting the moment by dictating descriptions to their slaves for future bragging sessions. One woman is drawing her dessert. She's labeled it Ambrosial Triumph. Your stomach, meanwhile, is begging for something plain, something normal. A piece of bread, a boiled egg. Anything that hasn't been lacquered, sculpted, or commissioned. But that's not the point. The point is extravagance, spectacle. This food isn't meant to feed you, it's meant to stun you, to leave you speechless with the sheer absurdity of it all. The cost, the time, the resources all poured into creating a meal that looks better than it tastes, and leaves everyone slightly hungry but deeply impressed. Because in Rome, taste is subjective. But luxury, that's objective. And tonight, you've been fed a 7-course reminder that your host is richer, pettier, and more dramatic than Jupiter himself. You lean back, your stomach still hollow but your mind deeply overwhelmed. A slave walks by offering candied rose petals, and a small songbird wearing a crown. You decline. You've had enough art for one evening. Now all you want is a snack that doesn't come with a backstory. No, it's not a bathroom. It's a passageway. But Romans did puke during meals, sometimes on purpose, to make room for more food. You clutch your stomach. Dessert hasn't even started. You're at hour 4 of a banquet that refuses to die, and your digestive system has filed a formal complaint. Every bite since the eel jelly has been a threat. Your body is staging a slow revolt, and your stomach is making noises usually reserved for haunted ships. And now someone just leaned over and whispered something bone-chilling in your ear. If you need to vomit, the servants have a basin. You blink. You laugh nervously. They do not. Welcome to the Roman elite dining experience where the food never stops. The expectations are absurd, and purging between courses is considered both sensible and chic. Let's clarify something up front. The vomitorium is not, contrary to popular myth, a designated bath chamber. It's just the name of the exit passages in amphitheaters, meant to spew forth crowds of people. But the act of vomiting during meals? Oh, that was very real. Not everyone did it, mind you. Mostly the rich. Mostly the dramatic. Picture it. A man in a silk, trimmed toga, reclining on a marble couch, unbuttoning his belt mid-feast to release the pressure. He's eaten flamingo tongues, honey-roasted dormice, and a pie that hissed when he cut into it. He's had wine, then more wine, then a sweet wine boiled with dates and possibly regret. He wants dessert, but there's no room. Solution? Excuse himself, quietly purge in a silver bowl held by a tragically underpaid servant, rinse his mouth with rose water, and return for more peacock spleen. No judgment, no shame, just logistics. It wasn't about gluttony, okay? It was, but it was also about stamina. If your feast lasted 6 hours and had 12 courses, how else were you supposed to keep up without risking spontaneous combustion? You clutch your own belly and look around. No one's acting weird. Everyone's just pacing themselves. One guest nibbles a fig, dabs his lips, and casually steps away behind a curtain. He returns moments later, looking refreshed, smiling, and ordering a second helping of jellied ox cheek. And this is normal. In fact, vomiting wasn't even considered gross in these circles. It was practical. Some Romans believed it was healthy cleansing. Philosophers debated it. Doctors recommended it. Pliny the Elder probably had a recipe for soothing purge wine with lead. The practice even had accessories: vomiting basins, delicately perfumed cloths, mint, water to swish afterward. If you were truly refined, you had a designated slave for digestive assistance. Yes, that was a job title. You eye the corner of the room, where an ornate bronze urn has suspicious smudges near the rim. Someone pats it gently on their way past, like it's a friend. And the host? He encourages it, because the more you eat, the more flattered he is. You turning down a course because you're full is like telling him his wine is trash and his ancestors were frauds. You make room, or you fake a fainting spell. Either way, you do not skip dessert. You try to focus on breathing. You count the ceiling tiles. You pretend that peacock feather sculpture isn't spinning. You attempt to casually recline further into your couch, but you're already at full stretch. Your belt is now purely decorative. Someone passes a tray of candied fish eyes. You decline. A servant raises an eyebrow. Too full? He asks, gently, like a disappointed therapist. You nod. He nods. He returns moments later with a small clay bowl and a knowing smile. No, Absolutely not. You wave it away. You will not be part of this. You will suffer in silence, like a true modern soul, trapped in an ancient digestive horror story. Still, you can't help but admire the commitment, the audacity, the strategy. These people weren't just eating, they were conducting a ritual of dominance over the human body, replacing shame with smugness, treating biology like a suggestion. One man across the table is describing the time he once vomited during a Saturnalia feast and returned to eat an entire boar stuffed with figs. The others applaud. A woman describes a technique involving gentle rocking and mint leaves behind the ears. Another recommends pre-purging before dinner to maximize the pleasure of consumption. Someone else offers you a small herbal tablet made of cumin and bold decisions. You decline again, because while you may be a guest in ancient Rome, you still have limits. And if dessert involves peacock egg custard served inside a hollowed-out hedgehog, you'll simply have to suffer through it. Dignity intact, stomach trembling, and absolutely no intention of using that bowl. Probably. Pepper, cinnamon, saffron, these were worth their weight in gold. If it smells nice, it's probably been smuggled across deserts by someone who died doing it. You're afraid to sneeze near the spice dish. You stare at the tiny bowl in front of you. It's filled with a modest-looking pile of black specks. At first glance, it could be dirt or mouse droppings. But no, this is black pepper, and in ancient Rome, it's essentially powdered treasure. It's not just seasoning, it's a flex. You glance at the host, who gestures dramatically as he sprinkles it over a honey-glazed fig stuffed with pine nuts. A few granules fall to the floor. You wince, half expecting someone to dive after them like they're catching falling diamonds. That's how serious this stuff is. This one bowl of pepper, it could buy a cow. 2, if you're in a cheap neighborhood. You're not exaggerating. Spices in Rome were exotic imports from distant, perilous places. They traveled thousands of miles across mountains, rivers, and deserts through storms, bandits, and tax collectors who thought duty meant double the price if you look nervous. Some poor trader risked everything to bring that cinnamon stick to your table. He may have lost his horse, his camel, and possibly a few toes. Also, a bored senator could sprinkle it on his lentils and declare them acceptable. The demand for these spices was insatiable. Peppercorns from India, saffron from Spain and Persia, cassia bark from China, ginger, cloves, cardamom, all arriving in dusty caravans and creaky ships, and all sold for prices that made seasoned merchants burst into tears and then charge extra. You reach for the pepper bowl. A servant stops you. "Use the spoon," he whispers, pointing to a delicate sliver of ivory balanced on the rim like it's part of a sacred ritual. You comply. You sprinkle one solitary flake onto your food. That flake just cost someone 3 days' wages. You eat it slowly, reverently, like it's the last spice on earth. And it doesn't even taste that different. Not really. Just a little heat, a little complexity. But the symbolism? That's where the value is. Spices, in Roman culture, were luxury incarnate. Owning them meant power. Serving them meant wealth. Overusing them meant you were trying too hard but subtly showing them off. That was the goal. You didn't want to be new money vulgar. You wanted to be ancient money mysterious. Which brings us to saffron. Your host gestures grandly as the next dish is presented. A rice pudding dyed a cheerful, expensive yellow. The color alone screams, "I bought this spice from a man who hasn't seen his family in 5 years." Saffron comes from the stigma of a specific flower. Each bloom produces 3 strands. That's it. It takes around 75,000 flowers to make a single pound, which is why this pudding is less dessert and more edible bank statement. And then there's cinnamon. You smell it before you see it spicy, sweet, and slightly overwhelming. It's been shaved over stewed pears, baked into bread, and even boiled into wine. The Romans thought it had medicinal properties, aphrodisiac effects, and possibly the ability to summon minor deities. They used it liberally in perfumes, incense, and bizarre attempts at toothpaste. The cinnamon you're eating? Probably from Ceylon or Ethiopia. It was passed hand to hand along the Silk Road, traded through Arabian ports, and carried by people who bartered their safety for something that looked like fancy tree bark. And you're just trying not to sneeze. Because if you do, if even a single grain goes flying into the wind, you'll be responsible for wasting something that's more tightly guarded than imperial secrets. You imagine a servant appearing from the shadows, shaking their head. That was 3 denarii, gone, forever. The truth is, Rome ran on status, and few things screamed, "I'm better than you," louder than a pantry full of things no one else could afford. Forget land, forget titles. If you had a jar of cloves, you were a somebody. Some rich families even kept their spices under lock and key, guarded like jewelry. You weren't allowed to just season to taste. You had to earn your sprinkle. There were recipes written with phrases like, "Add a grain of saffron if you're feeling bold," and 3 peppercorns 4 if you hate your heirs. Even the funerals weren't safe. Spices were burned during cremations to mask the smell and to show off. It wasn't enough to be mourned, you had to be fragrant. You finish your meal, tongue tingling faintly from the saffron, ginger, honey, cinnamon cocktail of your dessert. You lean back, dazed, full, and only slightly panicked about what this dinner might have cost the empire. Because in ancient Rome, food wasn't about sustenance, it was about spectacle, about status, and occasionally, about turning your seasoning cabinet into a small military campaign. You look at the pepper bowl one last time, and you sneeze. Softly. Everyone freezes. You whisper an apology to the spice gods, and hope they're feeling merciful. It's cheese. It's moving. You're told this is normal. You're told it's delicious. You're told if the maggots jump into your eyes, that's just part of the charm. You stare at your plate like it just insulted your family. The cheese is soft, slightly bulging, and actively squirming. Not metaphorically, literally. It wriggles when the breeze hits it. A small pale lava makes a break for the edge. A servant gently nudges it back in with the end of a spoon, like a shepherd guiding a very upsetting sheep. Welcome to Roman hospitality. This isn't just cheese, it's delicacy. Aged to perfection, or at least aged until something in it gave up on structural integrity and began a new life as a protein-packed ecosystem. It's called formaticum vivum, or living cheese. You know, because of the worms. The Romans believed deeply in 2 things. Food should have character, and rot is a suggestion, not a deal breaker. If your cheese isn't slightly hostile, is it even cultured? The maggots? They're not a mistake, they're a feature, a selling point. These are cheese flies specially encouraged to lay eggs in cracks and crevices of soft pecorino so that the larvae can help ferment the cheese from the inside. As the maggots eat, they produce enzymes that break down fats, soften the texture, and create a cheese that is technically illegal in at least 3 modern countries. Your host gestures to the cheese plate proudly. The flavor is more alive this way, he says, as a maggot cartwheels off the fork, side and lands on his napkin. He flicks it away with all the concern of someone brushing off a sesame seed. You are now faced with a choice, try it, or fake a religious objection. But you're a guest. In Rome. At a fancy dinner. The social contract demands you at least nibble the terrifying dairy product that's threatening to walk off the table. So you cut off the smallest piece possible, carefully avoiding the more mobile sections, and bring it to your lips. The smell hits first, pungent, sharp, like someone set fire to a barn and then made a cologne out of it. The texture is soft, almost spreadable, with tiny, twitchy surprises scattered throughout. You chew slowly. It's creamy, salty, surprisingly complex. And then something wiggles against your gum. You stop chewing. You reconsider all your life choices. You swallow. It's not terrible. If you ignore the movement, it actually has a deep umami flavor. Rich, earthy, bizarrely satisfying. Like blue cheese that went on a spiritual journey and came back, enlightened but unstable. You look up. Everyone's watching. You smile. You nod. They applaud. Someone claps you on the back and says, "Ah, you're one of us now." You try not to cry. And this cheese isn't even rare. The ancient Romans made and consumed dozens of cheese varieties, hard, soft, fresh, aged, smoked, salted, even fried. Cheese was for everyone. Peasants had crumbly farmer's cheese with bread, while elites had entire cheese courses laced with honey, herbs, and in today's case, protein that resists digestion. Some Romans even believed cheese had medicinal qualities. Mixed with vinegar, a cure for indigestion, rubbed on the skin, a salve for wounds, shoved up the nose, a treatment for headaches. Unclear if it worked, but it definitely cleared a room. And then there's the maggot jump. Yes, that's real. These larvae are acrobatic. When disturbed, they spring into the air using their tiny, horrifying bodies as levers. Think of it as dairy popcorn except alive, and aiming for your eye socket. It's a well-known hazard. Guests have been spotted shielding their faces with napkins while digging in, like they're attending a gladiator match fought entirely by insects. You decide to try one more bite. This one's mostly cheese. Mostly. A rogue maggot clings to the edge, doing a tiny interpretive dance. You chew around it. You chew through it. You are now a person who eats bugs, and you are coping. The meal continues. The cheese disappears. Guests exchange notes on aging techniques and worm placement. Someone recommends a version aged in clay pots with figs and thyme. Someone else swears by sheep's milk for optimal wriggle. A philosopher quotes Aristotle while licking a writhing smear off his thumb. You're not sure if this is bravery or madness. Probably both. But you've learned something important. In Rome, food is not a comfort. It's a challenge, an experience, a dare wrapped in social obligation and served on pottery that predates your entire family tree. And if that cheese bites back, you take it as a compliment. Bon appetit. Think peasants ate clean? Think again. Their bread is full of sawdust. Their beans are old. Their lentils may have legs. They eat to survive, not to thrive. You wake up at dawn in a Roman village. There is no breakfast waiting. No scent of fresh coffee, no eggs sizzling in butter. Instead, you get a faint whiff of damp straw and disappointment. Your stomach growls, but don't get excited. The day's first meal isn't a thing. It's more of a suggestion. You shuffle outside to join your fellow peasants sunburnt, blistered, and permanently hunched from hauling things that weigh more than your dignity. One of them hands you a piece of bread. You take a bite. You immediately regret it. It's hard. Not in the crusty on the outside, soft on the inside kind of way. More like accidentally bitter rock hard. And in many cases, that's not metaphorical. Roman peasant bread was often made with low-quality flour that included bits of grit, ash, or sand. Sometimes even intentional additives like ground-up bean husks or sawdust to bulk it out when grain supplies were low. Your teeth are not just chewing, they're grinding. You swallow and feel the bread continue down like a brick being politely escorted through your digestive tract. Today's lunch? More bread. Maybe a spoonful of lentils that have been boiling since last week. They're mushy, brown, and covered in a mysterious film that's either olive oil or despair. Occasionally, a weevil floats to the top. You pretend not to see it. It pretends not to be there. It's a social contract. Sometimes you get beans. But these aren't fresh green pods from a market stand. These are dry, cracked beans stored in a dusty jar since your cousin's last funeral. You cook them for hours, and they still crunch. You chew and try not to think about how many tiny beetles had to be scooped out of the pot before it hit the fire. And meat? That's for rich people, or feasts, or fantasy novels. You might see meat once a year, maybe twice, if a neighbor's goat dies unexpectedly and everyone gets a suspiciously generous stew the next day. Instead, your protein comes from chickpeas, lentils, and the occasional egg. If the chickens are in a good mood, if they're not busy being dinner themselves. Your neighbor once swore he saw a fish in the local stream. That was 5 years ago. He still tells the story like it's a religious experience. Herbs and spices? Hilarious. Salt is precious and often reserved for preserving things, not for making your sad gruel taste better. You might have access to wild herbs, thyme, oregano, maybe a handful of bitter greens, but they mostly just make your soup taste like angry salad water. And don't get started on olive oil. The elites pour it over everything like it's going out of style. You, meanwhile, are stretching a tiny clay jar of it across a month of meals, watching every drop like it's liquid gold, which, for you, it basically is. You dab a little on your bread to soften it. It doesn't work. On a really good day, you might get cheese. Crumbly, sharp, slightly suspicious. It's homemade, kept in a damp cloth, and often shares a storage shelf with the onions and a large toad that no one has the heart to remove. You cut off a piece, avoiding the blue spots. You pretend they're herbs. You lie to yourself. It helps. There is fruit sometimes. Dried figs, wrinkled and sticky, or maybe a bruised apple. But more often it's fermented into vinegar because nobody wants to risk scurvy and sadness at the same time. Still, you eat. Because eating isn't about pleasure. It's about function. About having just enough energy to make it through a day of farming, carrying, grinding, hauling, surviving. You chew each bite not because it's delicious, but because it's fuel. And because spitting it out would mean admitting that your only meal for the day might win in a fistfight against you. And through it all, you hear the rich talk about the noble simplicity of peasant food. Simple? Yes. In the way that drowning is just water. Noble? Only if nobility involves sharing an onion between 5 people and pretending it's a feast. So next time someone romanticizes ancient rustic cuisine, hand them a bowl of slightly sour lentils with mystery bits and a slice of bread that doubles as a weapon. Then ask them how noble it feels when the lentils start crawling. Walk through a Roman market, and your nostrils are assaulted by a symphony of raw meat, spoiled fish, sweaty vendors, and buckets of garum baking in the Sunday bon appetit. Your first mistake was breathing through your nose. Your second mistake was thinking the Roman marketplace was going to smell like fresh fruit and baked bread. Instead, it hits you like a chariot to the face, hot, humid, and deeply offensive. You've just stepped into the Macellum, the heart of Roman commerce, and it smells like something died. Probably because something did. Let's start with the fish stall. There's no refrigeration in ancient Rome, no ice, no helpful little thermometers assuring you that today's mackerel is safe for human consumption. Instead, there are wooden tables soaked with old seawater and regret. Rows of limp fish glisten under the Mediterranean sun, their eyes cloudy, their gills questionable, and their general vibe deeply mournful. You try to walk past quickly. You fail. Because right next to them is a tub. A large tub of garum. You remember garum, Rome's favorite condiment, made by fermenting fish guts in salt for several months until it becomes a liquid, so potent it could probably be used to melt bronze. This tub has been sitting in the heat since sunrise. It bubbles. It fumes. It smells like betrayal, old shoes, and something that once had feelings. A vendor stirs it with a ladle that used to be silver, and people are buying it. Happily, a woman beside you purchases an entire jug and says she's using it in a dessert. You make eye contact with a squid on the next table. It looks like it wants to be put out of its misery. You move on to the meat section. Another mistake. Slabs of goat, beef, and poultry hang from hooks like prizes in a horror museum. There are flies. So many flies. Some are doing loop-de-loops, others are just sitting down for dinner. You watch a butcher slice through a pig's leg, with a knife the size of a canoe paddle. He's singing. You try to appreciate the variety. There are sausages of unknown origin, smoked meats that may be older than you. One stall is selling what appears to be roasted sparrows on a stick. Another has rabbit, squirrel, and something labeled forest beast. You do not ask questions. You do not make eye contact. The produce section is slightly better. Slightly. There are figs, grapes, apples, and olives, piled high in wicker baskets. Some of them are fresh. Others are trying their best. You pick up a pear and put it down quickly. It was soft in all the wrong places. Then you find the onions. The onions are winning. Their smell is everywhere. Sharp, acidic, and relentless. Mixed with the sweat of vendors yelling in Latin, the musk of goats tied to posts, and the ever-present whiff of open drains that run helpfully right through the middle of the market. Ah, yes. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's proud sewer system. Convenient, efficient, and only slightly open to the air. It gurgles beside the bread stall. You do your best not to imagine the journey your loaf has taken before reaching your hands. Someone bumps into you. Their tunic is damp. You apologize and take several steps back. A child is selling fermented turnips. Another is trying to barter a live chicken for a piece of copper jewelry. The chicken appears to be leading the negotiation. A man in a robe is preaching about bean purity while handing out samples. You try one. It crunches. You spit it out. He blesses you anyway. Overhead, birds circle hopefully. They know what's coming. The scraps, the spills, the occasional unwatched eel flopping its way to freedom. This is their buffet too. And through it all, the smells just keep building. Sun-baked cheese, rotten fruit. Fresh bread, that is, somehow, still infused with garlic from 2 stalls over. A perfume stall tries to cut through the chaos with wafts of myrrh and rose oil, but all it does is create a floral fish fusion that will haunt you until your dying breath. You pass a stall selling honey cakes. For a moment, things seem pleasant, sweet, safe. Then you realize they're covered in bees. Not near. On. The vendor shrugs. They like sugar. You nod. You leave. By the time you escape the market, your clothes have absorbed at least 7 different scents, 2 of which may be permanent. You are sticky, overwhelmed, and slightly hungry despite everything. That's the Roman marketplace for you. A chaotic, pungent, glorious mess. And the best part? You'll be back tomorrow, because somehow, against all odds, you still need more garum. Rule #1, don't trust the water. Rule #2, don't trust the meat. Rule #3, don't trust the sauce. So basically, good luck. You've made it through 3 meals in ancient Rome, and miraculously you're still standing. But that doesn't mean you're safe. In fact, the real danger hasn't even started yet. Because while the food may look harmless, rustic, hearty, full of charming grit and character, it's actually a high-stakes game of intestinal roulette. Let's begin with the water. If you're thirsty, I have bad news. Drinking straight from the tap, or rather, the public fountain fed by aqueducts, is essentially asking to be haunted by bacteria. Rome's aqueduct system was an engineering marvel, but sanitation wasn't exactly their strong suit. The water runs through lead pipes. Yes, lead. Delicious, heavy metal goodness flowing right into your cup. Even if the water doesn't immediately poison your brain, it's almost guaranteed to host a vibrant community of microbes. Protozoa, parasites, mysterious floaty bits all hanging out in your goblet like it's a party. Romans knew this. That's why most of them diluted wine with water instead of the other way around. Alcohol, after all, might kill the germs. Or you. Either way, it's progress. So now you're sipping suspicious wine water, trying to stay hydrated without losing vision in one eye. What's for dinner? Ah, meat. Rule of thumb in ancient Rome. If it smells only slightly rancid, it's probably fine. Maybe. There's no refrigeration. No sell. By dates. Meat preservation options are limited to salt, smoke, or blind optimism. You're served a fresh cut of pork, and you decide not to ask when the pig passed away. The cook swears it's safe because it's been boiled. In wine, with vinegar, and garlic, and mint. It's less flavor profile, and more culinary panic. Still, you eat it, because refusing food in someone's home is rude, and possibly dangerous. So you chew slowly, politely, and pretend you didn't just bite into something that tastes like it's auditioning for a second life as compost. Next comes the sauce. You already know about garum, that fermented fish sauce made from guts, time, and poor decision-making. But garum isn't the only sauce on the Roman menu. There's defrutum, a boiled-down grape syrup often sweetened with, you guessed it, lead. Apparently, lead made it thicker and shinier, which is great if your top priority is shiny poison. There's also maritum, a garlic and cheese paste that seems harmless until you realize the cheese might be alive and the garlic was stored next to the fish guts. And liquamen, which is basically garum's cousin who drinks too much and ruins weddings. So, the sauces are out. What's left? Fruit. Seems safe, right? Only if you wash it, which again means using Roman water. So now you have to decide, E. coli or a dirty plum. Maybe bread. A little bread can't hurt? Wrong again. Peasant bread is full of grit from the stone mills. Each bite slowly files down your molars like ancient dental sandpaper. Elite bread is better sifted, refined, but more likely to be stuffed with weird additives. One recipe calls for crushed poppy seeds and cumin, another for bits of cheese. One baker was famously caught mixing marble dust into his dough to cut costs. If you've ever wanted to floss with minerals, this is your moment. You look around the table and realize your fellow diners are faring no better. One is sweating profusely. Another is staring off into the middle distance, reconsidering his relationship with poultry. A third is bragging about how he hasn't vomited since Saturnalia. It's not a flex. He looks unwell. Of course, there were Roman food, safety rules. The aedial city officials were technically responsible for inspecting markets and preventing spoiled goods from being sold. But bribery was common. Enforcement was inconsistent. And the line between aged for flavor and rotting carcass was more philosophical than scientific. At this point, your best strategy is selective blindness. Don't ask what's in the sausage. Don't sniff the sauce. Don't look too closely at the cheese. If something wriggles, assume it's a garnish. And if all else fails, just eat what the dog won't. That's probably the best quality control Rome has to offer. So how do you not die from Roman food? Avoid the water unless it's been boiled, blessed, or fermented into oblivion. Eat meat while it's still lukewarm, and pray. Pretend sauces are optional. They aren't, but it helps. Choose bread over seafood. Always. Carry mint. You'll need it. And most importantly, keep your expectations low. Real low. Roman low. Because survival isn't about enjoying your meal. It's about getting through it without needing a priest, a doctor, or a brand new stomach. If you're a Roman soldier, your lunch is hardtack, vinegar, and some unfortunate jerky. You eat fast, chew faster, and pray you don't get scurvy before your next skirmish. You're marching down a dusty road somewhere in Gaul. Your feet ache, your armor's rubbing in places you didn't know you had, and the sun has turned your scalp into a lightly roasted loaf. You haven't bathed in a week, your tent mate snores like an angry mule, and now it's lunchtime, also known as the least exciting part of your miserable day. The centurion calls a short halt. You sit on a rock that's only slightly less jagged than your mood, and open your standard issue rations. Buccalatum, aka hardtack, a hunk of dried meat, and a flask of Posca sour wine vinegar diluted with water, and something you're trying very hard not to identify by, smell. Let's start with the hardtack. This biscuit has the texture of a floor tile and the flavor of compressed cardboard. It was baked until all joy was removed, then baked again just to be sure. Your teeth bounce off it. You look around to see if anyone else is struggling. They are. One guy is soaking his in Posca like it's a biscotti. Another is using his dagger to break off edible pieces. A third is just gnawing, slowly and angrily, like a beaver with a grudge. And still this stuff works. It's durable, packable, won't go moldy, and doubles as a blunt weapon in emergencies. During a siege, soldiers have reportedly eaten hardtack they carried for years. It wasn't stale. It was immortal. Now for the meat. Technically, this is jerky. Realistically, it's shredded regret. Dried in the sun and salted to the consistency of a leather sandal, it's meant to last forever, taste like nothing, and fill your stomach just enough that you don't faint during combat. You chew until your jaw cramps. You chew until it stops resisting. It never stops resisting. You give up and swallow it like shame. On rare occasions you might get pulse, a sort of porridge made from barley or spelt. It's the Roman version of comfort food. If your idea of comfort is bland paste cooked over a campfire with mystery herbs and exactly zero joy. Sometimes they toss in bits of onion or cheese, but those are luxury add-ons. For now, it's just grain and willpower. And then there's Posca. Ah, Posca, the soldier's drink of choice. Not because it's good, but because it's available. Made by mixing vinegar with water, it's technically hydrating, vaguely antibacterial, and unpleasant enough to keep you alert. You sip it with the resigned face of a man who has accepted his fate. It burns going down. You're grateful for that it means it's doing something. Still, there's a weird kind of comfort in the routine. You know what you're getting. It won't kill you. Probably. Unless the meat was a little too pink, or the water a little too green. And it's not all bleak. Occasionally, soldiers receive bonus rations, fresh bread, olives, cheese, even a bit of fruit, if the supply lines are feeling generous, and no one has accidentally eaten the entire cargo of dates in one sitting again, looking at you, Gaius. And when the pay comes through, you might splurge on some fried dough from a market stall, or a cup of real wine instead of battlefield vinegar, a small moment of pleasure between ambushes. Because soldiering in ancient Rome isn't glamorous. You're not lounging in a marble villa. You're hauling your life on your back, sleeping under the stars, and hoping your next battle doesn't involve flaming arrows or elephants. Food isn't fuel for the soul, it's literal fuel. Just enough to get you from one skirmish to the next without passing out or hallucinating a turnip that looks like Jupiter. Your messmate offers you a bite of something, unidentifiable. You accept, you chew, you swallow. You don't ask what it was. No one does. And honestly, that's the soldier way. Eat when you can, sleep when you're lucky, fight when you must. And if your lunch bites back, well, at least it's not the enemy. Not yet, anyway. Street vendors serve hot sausages, mystery stew, and fried something. It's cheap. It's fast. It may or may not be horse. You eat it anyway. You're wandering through a busy Roman alley, the kind lined with crumbling brick, graffiti written in angry Latin, and enough foot traffic to trample your dignity. Your stomach grumbles like a displeased senator, and you catch a whiff of something meaty, sizzling, and faintly dangerous. You follow the scent. Welcome to the ancient Roman equivalent of fast food. The Popinay little street-side snack bars that serve food hot, fast, and with minimal questions. You're not exactly sure what's cooking, but it smells edible. That's good enough. You approach a stall with a bubbling pot. The vendor, a man with a beard that's seen things, gestures proudly toward his offerings. Sausages coiled like sleeping snakes, a greasy stew that looks like it's been simmering since Caesar was in sandals, and something fried that resembles a squid, or possibly a towel. Your first option is the sausage. It's spitting over a charcoal brazier, turning golden brown with just the right amount of scorch. You ask what's in it. The vendor grins. Meat, he says. You blink. Which kind? His shrug is not encouraging, but it smells good, like garlic and spices and street-level ambition. You take one, bite into it, and miraculously it's tasty. Salty, chewy, a little gamey. You try not to picture the animal it came from, or which parts. Next up, the mystery stew. It's in a clay cauldron that may or may not have once held roofing tar. Inside floats a slurry of beans, barley, meat shreds, and maybe lentils. The surface glistens with fat. The prostellar scent? Earthy, smoky, slightly fishy. The vendor hands you a scoop with a crust of bread. You dip it, swirl it, and take a cautious bite. Not bad, not good, just food. Warm, vaguely nourishing, and thick enough to patch a hole in your tunic if necessary. You're about 68% sure it won't kill you. Those are solid odds in ancient Rome. Then comes the fried thing. It's golden, crispy, and glistening with oil. You ask what it is. The vendor pauses. He squints. Vegetable. You point at a second piece. Also vegetable? He hesitates longer this time. Yes. You eat it. It's crunchy. It tastes like salt and secrets. You're pretty sure it's not a vegetable. But here's the thing, none of that matters. You're eating on the go, surrounded by crowds, dust, donkeys, and the occasional philosopher shouting about ethics while holding a suspicious kebab. The atmosphere is electric. The food is hot. You don't ask questions because you don't want the answers. These thermopolia Roman fast food joints are everywhere. They're the heartbeat of working-class Rome. Rich people have slaves and private chefs. You have Gracchus and his one-eyed dog selling eel fritters from a cart next to a public latrine. The vibes are different. The stalls are open to the street, lined with terracotta jars sunk into stone counters, each filled with a different concoction. Some are soups, some are stews. One may contain wine, or vinegar, or last week's regrets. The best part? You don't need plates. You don't need forks. You just grab, chew, wipe your hands on your tunic and keep walking. It's like drive-through, but with more yelling. Of course, there are risks. Food safety regulations are more of a suggestion. Rats are regulars. Spoilage is inevitable. And sometimes, the meat supply chain involves decisions no one's proud of. If a donkey died 2 streets over, odds are high it'll reappear here tomorrow in patty form. Still, the people love it. The bustle, the smells, the thrill of not knowing if you're eating sheep, liver, or pigeon. It's all part of the experience. And not all street food is terrifying. You might find chickpea fritters spiced with cumin, or honey-glazed pastries stuffed with dates. Occasionally, a vendor specializes in libum, a soft, sweet cheese bread that tastes like clouds and safety. You cry a little when you eat it. It feels illegal to be that happy, but that's the exception. Mostly, you're gambling. Every bite could be lunch, or a 12-hour tour through your digestive system's darkest corners. You learn quickly. Eat it while it's hot, chase it with vinegar wine, and hope for the best. As you finish your fried mystery lump, you see a child selling skewers of roasted dormouse. You politely decline. You've had your protein quota for the day. And tomorrow? You'll be back. Of course you will. Because it's cheap, it's everywhere. And despite everything, it's oddly comforting. Street food in Rome is not safe. It's not clean. It's not polite. But it's real. And if it tastes weird, just smile and ask for seconds. Because here, you don't eat to impress. You eat to survive with flavor, fire, and absolutely no idea what's in your mouth. There's no sugar yet, so everything, even meat, is glazed with honey. Your dessert? Candied olives, fig paste, and regret. The Roman Empire doesn't have sugar, but it does have bees. Lots of them. Angry, overworked bees buzzing their way across the Mediterranean just to produce the only acceptable sweetener available, honey. And Romans? They use it on everything. You've just finished dinner, if you can call boiled eel, stuffed dormouse, and fish gut sauce a meal, and now it's time for dessert. You brace yourself. You assume it'll be fruit. It's not. The first course is candied olives. Your mouth prepares for something briny and savory, but instead, you get the culinary equivalent of a practical joke. Sweet, sticky, and aggressively confusing. The honey glazes your teeth. The olive punches your taste buds. You smile and nod like your palate isn't experiencing betrayal in 3 acts. Next comes fig paste. It looks like jam. It smells like jam. It has the texture of warm tar. It's been boiled, reduced, mixed with nuts, and possibly salted anchovy for balance. You're told it's healthy. You're told it's energizing. You're not told why it's vibrating slightly on the plate. And then comes the pièce de résistance. Honeyed meat. Yes, meat, with honey. This isn't dessert. This is art. Specifically the kind of art that upsets people. Roasted game bird, crisped to golden perfection, then slathered in a thick honey glaze, sprinkled with sesame seeds, and decorated with a sprig of something that looks like it could heal wounds, or cause hallucinations. Maybe both. You take a bite. The skin is crunchy, the glaze is cloying, the meat is birdish. You chew through it slowly, carefully as your brain tries to reconcile what it's experiencing. Dinner? Or dessert? Or a challenge? Because for the Romans, honey isn't a finishing touch, it's a lifestyle, a philosophy. If you can eat it, it can be glazed, drizzled, stuffed, or soaked in honey. This includes fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, legumes, and, at one terrifying dinner party, a boiled turnip. Even wine isn't safe. Romans would sweeten their wine with honey to create mulsum, a mixture that's halfway between a drink and a syrupy trap. It's sticky, floral, and slides down your throat like a confused bee on a water slide. But why honey? Because it's versatile. It preserves food. It masks the taste of things that shouldn't be edible. It's medicine. It's status. And it's the only thing sweet enough to make Roman cuisine vaguely enjoyable. If you've just spent an hour chewing sand bread and drinking vinegar, you spot a tray of honey cakes being passed around. They look promising. Soft, golden, slightly puffed. You reach for one with trembling hope. It sticks to your fingers immediately. You bite in. It's warm, chewy, not bad. Then the aftertaste hits a sharp, herbal tang that reveals this cake has been baked with lovage, a Roman herb that tastes like celery, got into a fight with licorice. Your smile falters. Someone hands you a spoonful of dates stuffed with pine nuts and dipped in guess what, honey? You chew. The pine nuts are crunchy. The dates are sweet. The honey is more honey. You wash it all down with oxymel, a vinegar honey tonic meant to help digestion, clear the throat, and, presumably, confuse your body into thinking this was a normal meal. And while you're recovering, a philosopher at the end of the table announces that honey is sacred, a gift from the gods, symbol of immortality, the nectar of life. You quietly wonder if immortality is worth this much stickiness. Still, there's no denying its importance. Honey was used in offerings to the gods, in embalming, in medicine, in beauty treatments. Wealthy women slathered it on their skin to glow like Venus. Soldiers used it on wounds. Priests dripped it into sacred fires. You, meanwhile, have it on your tunic, your hands, and somehow behind your ear. The server brings one last tray. You brace for impact. It's a delicacy. Fried pastries drizzled with honey and black pepper. You blink. Black pepper? In dessert? Welcome to Rome. You take a bite. And it's actually good? Crispy, warm, oddly complex. Sweet and spicy. You consider asking for another. Then a bee lands on your forehead and you decide that's enough. So yes, Romans loved honey. Almost too much. It was their sugar, their sauce, their salve, and their everything. And while your modern tongue may need a moment, or a therapy session, to adjust, it's impossible not to respect the commitment. Because nothing says decadence quite like glazing a flamingo tongue in honey and calling it light fare. Sweet. Dreams. Literally. They believed lettuce made you sleepy, beans made you gassy, fair. And cabbage cured everything. You're handed boiled cabbage soup. It does not cure disappointment. Welcome to the medical marvels of ancient Rome, where your doctor is also your neighbor, and your prescription is something that came from the garden and smells like a compost pile. There are no pills, no vitamins, and definitely no FDA. There's cabbage. Lots and lots of cabbage. You're seated on a rickety stool, wrapped in a toga that smells faintly of goat, staring into a steaming bowl of grey-green mush. Your host beams. Cabbage, he says proudly, is the key to long life, clear skin, and moral integrity. You take a sip. It tastes like swamp. If sadness had a broth, this would be it. You nod politely while your insides quietly file a complaint. Cabbage was basically the Roman answer to everything. Feeling sick? Cabbage. Too drunk? Cabbage. Gout? Indigestion? Spiritual unrest? Or vague malaise? More cabbage. The writer, Cato the Elder, swore by it, claiming it could heal wounds and keep the body pure. If he were alive today, he'd have a TikTok wellness brand called Kale but make it Roman. Then there's lettuce. Romans categorized lettuce by effect. There's the wild kind, which they said makes you sleepy, and the tame kind, which they said also makes you sleepy, but in a less aggressive way. Basically, all lettuce was Roman melatonin. A bowl before bed, and boom, you're out like a torch in a rainstorm. Sadly, none of this lettuce came with ranch dressing or croutons. It was usually served warm, wilted, and seasoned with vinegar and disappointment. Now beans. Beans were complicated. The Romans loved beans. They were cheap, easy to grow, and, most importantly, full of consequences. Everyone agreed beans made you gassy, which the Romans accepted as a necessary evil. Some philosophers even argued that releasing gas was healthy. One ancient medical text literally says, "Better out than in." Shrek didn't invent that, Pliny the Elder did. Beans were also slightly mystical. The priestly class known as the Vestals refused to eat them, believing beans connected the living and the dead. Some even thought the souls of the departed traveled through bean plants. So the next time your soup gives you strange dreams, you can blame ghost legumes. And let's not forget garlic and onions. To a Roman, these weren't just condiments, they were medicine. Garlic was believed to strengthen the body and drive away illness, basically ancient Gatorade. Gladiators ate it before combat. Soldiers stuffed it into their rations. Your breath could clear a room, but your blood pressure? Probably excellent. Onions were for purification. Want to ward off infection? Rub an onion on it. Sore throat? Onion poultice. Got caught lying in court? Try not to cry, they'll assume you ate onion to fake it. Romans had a whole catalogue of these culinary prime splend, cures, each one more questionable than the last. Like vinegar. Glorious, sour, skin-stripping vinegar. To them, vinegar wasn't just a cleaning product, it was a healing tonic. Mixed with water to make posca, it was the drink of choice for soldiers and the poor. They thought it sharpened the mind, cleansed the body, and, if you gargled it, cured everything from coughs to heartbreak. You try sipping it now, your teeth squeak. Your dignity files a formal resignation. Then there's honey. Yes, again with the honey. Romans believed honey healed wounds, cured insomnia, soothed burns, and made you live longer. If it didn't solve your problem directly, it at least made your cabbage soup taste slightly less like punishment. As for fruit, grapes were good. Unless you had a cough, then they were evil. Apples were wholesome, pears were suspicious, and dates were excellent for digestion, unless you ate too many, in which case they caused intestinal fire. No one explains what that means. You choose not to find out. You ask if maybe walking is good for your health. Your host nods vigorously. Very good, he says, especially after a meal. Unless it's windy. Then the demons enter your ears. Right, so windy weather is out. In truth, Roman health advice was a blend of practical wisdom, wild guesses, and straight-up superstition. Some of it works. Eating plants, drinking lots of water, after boiling it, please, and avoiding overeating. Other parts, not so much. Like the belief that sneezing was a sign of divine approval, or that certain herbs could make you invisible to disease if buried in your pillow. You finish your cabbage soup. It's gone lukewarm. Your spoon has wilted slightly. But hey, you're healthier now. Right? At least that's what they'll tell you. Right before offering you another bowl. You've been summoned to dine with a mad emperor who once served guests 600 ostrich brains and then replaced their food with wax. You pretend to. Enjoy it so you don't die. This isn't just dinner. This is performance art under threat of execution. Welcome to the table of Elagabalus teenage emperor, self-declared sun god, and absolute culinary wildcard. If normal Roman dining was unpredictable, this is what happens when unpredictability drinks too much wine and puts on a crown. You arrive at the palace dressed in your finest toga, which means it's freshly scrubbed and only mildly smells of sheep. The banquet hall is glowing with torchlight. Incense thickens the air. Musicians pluck dissonant tunes. And the food? Oh, the food. The first course arrives under silver domes. You brace for something exotic, but not this exotic. Your plate holds what appears to be an eyeball. Large, glossy, still twitching. The server informs you it's a delicacy. boiled ostrich brain, carefully scooped and seasoned with saffron, pepper, and the deep psychological trauma of whoever prepared it. You eat it. Not because you're hungry, because the emperor is watching, and he's smiling. Elagabalus, perched at the head of the table in golden robes and far too many rings, doesn't eat. He stares, occasionally giggles. He's rumored to enjoy watching guests squirm more than feasting himself. His dining philosophy seems to be, how many rich people can I confuse, insult, or permanently unnerve before dessert? You look down at your next course. It's a roast chicken. Only it's made of wax. You prod it with your knife. It bounces. You glance around. Other guests are quietly panicking. One bites into a sausage and finds it's also wax. Another tries to cut a loaf of bread and hits what sounds like marble. This is Elagabalus's favorite prank, replacing the entire meal with realistic inedibles. No warning. No explanation. Just a silent, chaotic test of your dignity. Someone laughs nervously. Someone else faints. You take a sip of wine, which, thank the gods, is still real. You swish it around in your mouth and try not to look like you're plotting your own escape. Then come the roses. Out of nowhere, ceiling panels slide open and an avalanche of rose petals pours down. It's beautiful at first, like a wedding, then it keeps going, and going, and going. Someone is buried up to their neck. Another guest disappears entirely. You try to stand and slip on a layer of perfumed romance. You've read about this before. Elagabalus once allegedly smothered guests beneath mountains of flowers. They thought it was a lovely surprise. Then they couldn't breathe. The petals finally stop falling. You emerge from the floral landslide looking like a deranged bride. Elagabalus claps his hands, delighted. A servant announces the next course. You prepare your soul. It's a pie. So far, so good. It smells sweet. It's golden brown. You slice it open, hoping for figs or nuts. Instead, birds fly out. Live birds. Tiny songbirds flap around the room, screaming. One lands in your goblet. Another lands on your head. Everyone claps. You begin to doubt your grip on reality. That's when the dessert arrives. Jellyfish, served cold, dusted with edible gold. You try a spoonful. It wobbles. It slides down your throat with all the grace of a damp slug wearing jewelry. You cough. A nobleman across the table smiles through tears. And it's not just the food. The entire banquet is a labyrinth of humiliation and forced delight. Elagabalus is known to seat his guests based on astrological signs, personality traits, or just sheer chaos. If he dislikes you, your seat may collapse mid-course. If he really dislikes you, your dish may include a hidden frog. Live, of course. He's also been known to serve entire courses made of inedible materials, glass grapes, ivory mushrooms, and one memorable evening, a soup made entirely of pearls and vinegar. Everyone agreed it was both crunchy and awful. Still, you smile. You nod. You pretend this is the best dinner you've ever had. Because one does not displease a man who once invited his friends to a feast and served them food made entirely from the tongues of flamingos. All 400 of them. Eventually, the banquet ends. Or at least, you're released from the table. Your clothes are stained with flower petals, jellyfish slime, and possibly glue. You exit into the night, belly empty, soul shaken. But you're alive. Which, all things considered, is the best dessert of the evening. Because dinner with Elagabalus wasn't a meal. It was a test. And somehow, you passed. You wake up with stomach cramps, sticky fingers, and goat milk as the only hangover cure. Your toga is stained. There's garum in your hair. And someone's already boiling more dormice for brunch. Welcome to post-banquet Rome, where the only thing louder than the street vendors is your digestive system crying for help. You open one eye. Mistake. The sunlight feels like betrayal. Your mouth is dry, your head is spinning, and your stomach sounds like it's trying to negotiate terms of surrender. You sit up slowly, the way one might rise from a shallow grave. Your toga, which was white and respectable yesterday, is now a map of last night's culinary crimes. There's a streak of honey across your chest, 2 fig seeds in your armpit, and something in your sandal that crunches when you move. It might be a roasted chickpea, or a beetle. You don't ask questions anymore. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor begins boiling dormice again. The smell hits you like a chariot, gamey, sweet, and lightly fried in despair. Your stomach does a barrel roll. You consider fleeing to the countryside. But first, hydration. You stagger to the basin and reach for the wine jug. Empty. Naturally. The only remaining liquid in the room is a lukewarm pitcher of goat milk. Thick, warm, dubiously sourced. It stares back at you with the quiet threat of curdling. Still, it's all you've got. Romans believed goat milk cured hangovers. They were wrong, but also out of options. You drink it. It coats your tongue like regret. Your stomach responds with what feels like a passive-aggressive shrug. You attempt to stand. Your knees say no. Your back says absolutely not. You reach for something solid to lean on and accidentally knock over a platter of hardened pastries that no one wanted last night. They hit the ground like bricks. One bounces. You make a mental note to never eat again. Then, from outside, a cheerful shout, "Brunch time!" You whimper. The scent of boiling cabbage and fried snails drifts in through the window. Someone is laughing. Someone else is retching. The city is alive and well fed. You are neither. A servant appears with a tray of recovery foods. It includes olives soaked in vinegar, stale bread, and a single boiled egg that looks like it's judging you. There's also a side of moritum, a garlic and cheese paste with the texture of wall plaster and the smell of a broken friendship. You nibble at the bread. It's hard enough to chip a tooth. You try the egg. It's cold, rubbery, and somehow manages to taste both overcooked and raw. You move on to the moritum. Big mistake. Your entire mouth is now garlic. Your breath could clear a temple. You silently apologize to every deity in the pantheon. There's also a small bowl of fruit, grapes and dates. Seems safe. You eat a few grapes and instantly feel a bit more human. Then you bite into a date that's been stuffed with something. It's nutty, spicy, and deeply suspicious. You decide not to finish it. You look around the room. There's a poet asleep on your floor. Someone's sandal is on your table. A decorative bowl has been used as a sick bucket. Your dignity is nowhere to be found. And yet, this is normal. In ancient Rome, feasts weren't just dinner, they were tests of endurance. Hours of eating, drinking, vomiting, sometimes by design, followed by sleep so troubled it bordered on legally haunted. Waking up like this means you participated. You survived. You are technically a social success. A chorus of flutes begins somewhere outside, probably heralding another festival, or a neighbor's cousin's birthday, or just Tuesday. In Rome, there's always a reason to celebrate, and every celebration involves wine, honey, exotic meat, and a surprise food item that shouldn't legally be edible. You drink more goat milk. It still tastes like betrayal, but your head feels slightly less like it's about to explode. Someone knocks at your door. A friend. He looks worse than you. His toga is torn, his eyes are wild, and he's holding a single eel wrapped in cabbage leaves. "Leftovers," he says. You close the door slowly. The city will keep partying. The banquets will never end. The garum will always flow. But for now, you lie back down. You stare at the ceiling. You promise yourself you'll eat nothing but barley and prayer from now on. And maybe you'll skip brunch. So tonight, as you curl into your soft, clean bed, no rodents, no fermented sauces, no faint whiff of boiled eel, take a moment to appreciate just how far we've come. You didn't have to choke down a honey-glazed dormouse today. You didn't wake up to your neighbor dumping fish guts into your soup. You didn't wash your dinner down with leaded wine. And for that, we give thanks. Because surviving Roman food wasn't just about eating. It was an act of courage, of resilience, of pretending you liked something called liver pâté baked in fig leaves, while silently praying it wouldn't kill you before dessert. Every bite was a gamble, every meal a performance. And still somehow they lived, laughed, and licked their fingers clean. The Romans built aqueducts, conquered half the world, and debated philosophy under the stars. All while snacking on goat cheese crawling with maggots. It's baffling, it's brilliant, it's a little bit disgusting, but above all, it's human. Because history isn't just about triumph or tragedy, it's about persistence, even when dinner fought back. So as your eyes get heavy and your blanket pulls tighter, whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors, to the lost art of seasoning without fear, and to the glorious miracle of modern food safety. Sleep well, brave time traveler. May your dreams be free of garum, and may your next meal come without a warning label. Good night.